Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Lower Providence Township Board of Supervisors for Thursday, October 6, 2016. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Good evening, Deb. Would you please call the roll?
Pleasure. Mr. Sergini.
Here.
Ms. Ekman. Absent. Mr. Duffy.
Here.
Mr. McFarland. Here. Ms. Zimmerman. Here.
Thank you very much. Prior to the meeting this evening, an executive session was held to discuss legal and real estate matters, and personnel matters, actually. The first item on the agenda tonight is the consent agenda consisting of the minutes from our previous meeting in September, as well as the treasurer's report and cash flow report. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the board? From the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2 on the list is a presentation of the 2017 proposed budget involving special projects and technology. Mr. Roth is with us this evening. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for allowing me to go tonight instead of the 13th with all the other department heads. I'd like to talk to you. It's a short 6-slide piece here, but it's just my responsibility. Everybody knows I'm the Business Development Committee chairperson. I work with a lot of the businesses, not just the ones in the business park, but along the major corridors. I support the technology and all the maintenance, and also handle posting the meetings on the cable channel. Tonight, I'll talk about my operational budget request, my capital budget request, and I'll go into some detail on a major item on the capital budget, and then later, if any questions. The operational budget, what you see on the screen is the categories of our operational budget with both the 2016 requested amount or amount that is expected to be spent, and the 2017 amount, the requested amount. You'll see that for the most part there are increases in some of the for equipment and supplies. It's really just standard to maintain our level of ability to support the systems here. And but the large item, the one that makes the most increase in it, is the economic development consultant for 2017 at $25,000. We're estimated to spend by the end of the year about $5,000. So that's the bulk of the increase for this year, if that is approved. We've seen some pretty good effort by the economic development consultant, and like was mentioned at the last meeting, hopefully by the end of October or early November, we be able to make some announcements about that effort. The other thing I'm looking for possibly is adding a drone and camera, so I could take some better pictures of the township, the events, maybe some of our commercial properties, and use that to also post on our website, which I'm also proposing. Again, other just minor increases in some of the other support costs are there. My capital budget, I have the major thing there is a website upgrade and redesign. It was designed in 2004, just before I came on board. It's the site that we've been using and maintaining. So it is relatively old, although, you know, for some of the residents, it's been a good site to be able to find information quickly and cleanly. I'm estimating about $25,000 will be required for that, but through an RFP process, we really have to see what was out there and who responds to it and what we can do with it. The other items, it's most of them are being replaced from 2011, and it's just the standard replacement of hardware that we have ongoing to maintain the level of service that we want to maintain. I'll work with the vendors to be able to make sure I get the best pricing possible. That total there is about $85,500 for the 2017 budget. Through the 5-year capital program that we started last year, the projections, I've tried to even out and move things from one year to the other that could be moved. Like this year, there was possibility of replacing marquee. I've moved that out a year. I want to make sure that I can get the website update done and the other critical hardware replacements in place. But what I'd really like to talk about is the website. Again, like I said, it was designed in 2004. It's very easy to maintain from a program here on our desktop. We did recently, within the last 2 or 3 years, we added a search field and a calendar. The calendar is implemented using Google. The search field allows residents, rather than hunting through all the web pages, they actually can do a search and bring back the relevant results. And all the files actually that are posted up on the website. But some of the new and improved features I've listed there, there's a lot of them, but to just touch on a few. Mobile friendly, if you're coming, a user's coming from a laptop, that's one thing. But if they're coming from a mobile phone or an iPad, the ability to the website to be able to adjust to display to that in an appropriate the information appropriately is really what you're looking for. The other term that you'll hear, drop-down menu design, where you're reusing the screen space, and there's a few of the websites that I'll bring up maybe to demonstrate some of these, but Limerick just happens to be one. There's many. I don't mean to say that Limerick is best or any of these other the best. It's something that they've implemented, but as you can see, their website has a structure to it. It uses the whole screen, but as you mouse over, drop-down menus come down. It reuses basically the desk space, so you can present more options just by moving of the mouse. The other things, having agendas and minutes on the page. They're also integrated, so you can actually go and pull up the minutes from a meeting or pull up the agenda. So it's very integrated. It's also integrated into a calendar structure too. So the other thing about this is you can actually, there's integration with social media, so you could actually share something on here so that your friends on Facebook can also say, hey, you like this site or you like this event. It's integration with social media. So there's other things too. There's ways to lay out slideshows, photo shows of the township. Although we're not paying for the pretty pictures, it's just a base design that most websites have now, but really you're paying for some other things. Again, the mobile friendly would be one of those things. Some of the other interesting things is translation capability, like Middletown Township, Bucks County. For a resident that moves in, it might, their main language might be something from, that it's not English. You can actually, using the Google Translate, you can actually pick a different language. And so some of who speaks Spanish here? Did I pick a language that was? So it might make it easier for somebody moving into the area that could find it easier to use. And it's something that's using Google Translate is implemented directly into the website. So just a few of the features. Limerick Township also has a how do I do this drop down. So if you have questions or things that are coming up constantly, where do I pay my taxes? You can actually directly go to something like that in a how do I do this section. So there's obviously other things. We would go out with an RFP. We do have a copy of one of the local municipalities that have gone out for an RFP just recently, but I'm sure through the municipal site, we could probably get a more relevant RFP and then tailor it to our needs. And I'll sit back and take any questions.
If I could, Just one thing on the previous slide. You were showing a storage device for 24,000 as a, you don't have to go back there, but it's.
Yes.
Fourth line. I'm just wondering about, is that a piece of hardware? Would we not be better off using the cloud? And should not the storage of our material information be off-site somewhere?
That actually is a physical device here. Our data is also stored out in the cloud as a backup. That's done through a device that's hosted, a device that's dedicated to basically pushing the data up to the cloud. So we actually do backups of our main file servers, file shares to the website and images of our servers so that we could recover if, car comes through the window down there and hits it just perfectly or, something like that. So we are doing backups to the cloud. That might, one of the other things that's happening in October is we're actually taking one of our servers, our GIS system, and we're actually hosting it at our vendor's site. It provides some additional capability for us to be able to do that and allows me to remove one of those virtual servers off the list that's running on the physical hardware. So some of that we are doing as far as backups and cloud. In the future, you could also move our email processing to the cloud. That would be something in the future that we'd possibly use. Right now, we have our own Exchange server here, so we get our email directly here in the township.
Okay. Just a comment on the web design. If you look at a website that was developed in 2004, we're probably a couple of upgrades short of current. So I would strongly support redeveloping this. But one thing I'd look for in terms of its design is, and you touched on a lot of them, Bill, which I think are important, mobile-friendly, translation ability and so forth, is an increase in hits and user interfaces. That would be the way you'd measure the return on this investment. Meaning if we're going to invest $25,000 in a web design and we don't get any more hits on it, we've wasted our money, I think. So the way I would look for that is for features that would make it far more easily used, many of which you just pointed out with menu drops and translation and mobile-friendly. But I would expect and hope, which I think would be a big benefit, that we would get far more use from our residents with regard to information available to them on the website. Just as a small example, just the Fall Fest was touchy weather-wise, and the Facebook was alive with people speculating amongst themselves whether it was going to happen or not. If we had an interactive social media, Carl could have, said, I'll make the call at 6 a.m., and everybody could have logged on and found it easily, with a more upgraded website. So I guess I'm just spouting here, but I think it's a very important project, and I'd be very interested in bringing the township forward in that regard.
Definitely agree. My only question, Bill, was actually about computers. Have the costs come down enough that, or to the point where it's more cost-effective to purchase our computers, or have we looked at leasing?
I think we did lease in the previous budget, and that's still an option, not the purchase, but the lease. And a dollar buyout at the end of, typically it's a 3 or 4 year
Right.
time frame, and you're basically purchasing the equipment for $1 at that point. At that point, the service support contract for that device is up,
Right.
and you can either continue to maintain that and go on, or replace it at that point. I think 4 to 6 years is typically the time frame that I look for the personal devices like a laptop or a small desktop. As a matter of fact, we've decreased the size of the desktop to a really small. It looks like a portable hard drive rather than a desktop. So,
Okay,
yes.
great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to new business, item 3A, discussion of LD-16-02 Classic Coachworks expansion which is a minor land development plan at 3949 Ridge Pike. And Mike Brzezinski has information, and the applicant's here this evening. Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Good evening, everyone. Go ahead, Michael,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Before the board for a presentation is a expansion of the Classic Coach Works existing building here at 3949 Ridge Pike. It's in the new Ridge Pike West zoning district. They're basically looking to increase efficiency by improving workflow by expanding their building by 6,000 square feet back towards the street a little bit. For those of you who are familiar, the property is a long property that fronts on Ridge Pike and sits up the hill a little bit, and basically this is using some of the available land, which they sit back off the road quite a bit. They've been to the Planning Commission a couple of times now, worked through the plan, also have met with Tim and myself, and have made some further revisions to the plan, and basically are here tonight to show you what they've come up with.
Sounds like my work is done here, Michael. Thank you. Keith McLennan, I'm here for John Schnoffer and Thomas Iliano, who are both here. Gents, thanks for being here. As Mike described, this facility has been there for many years. I think, John, you had mentioned to me earlier, you own this for over 30 years. And although it's certainly visible from the street, it's not terribly visible because it sits way back. It looks fine, but he wants to improve it, make it look better. I think there is a slide that I had given to you, Mike. If you're able to do it, fine. Otherwise, I can hand up what the proposed appearance is. So it certainly is attractive. And as Mike pointed out, it's really about workflow because there's just an entrance to the back, and the connection that would occur in the middle is just to add a paint booth and some work areas. Right now, it's a little crowded. So there's no real increase in traffic or increase in number of projects being undertaken there. So we're really not too concerned about that, although that was one of the issues that was raised in the past. But what we'd like to do is seek a few waivers from certain ordinances that would impact the project negatively from our perspective, one of which, of course, is the issue that was raised early on that I think we've addressed when Tim, Michael, and I met at the site on September 13th. That deals with the driveway issue in terms of widening and the sidewalks. As you may know, this site is next to Jim and Ralph's Produce. There aren't any sidewalks there now. There are no sidewalks on either side of the street there. And if there were sidewalks, they'd end up going into some gullies. So our view is that we'll put sidewalks in when the area develops. But at this point, we see it really as too expensive and sidewalks to nowhere that ultimately we think would create more of a safety issue than they would promote. And there's also the possibility that in that area, because you know how the curbing is right there, there's no shoulder. If Ridge has to be widened in any degree, any sidewalks that are placed there are going to have to be torn up in any event. I know the township, of course, is keen on sidewalks, but I think in this instance we're willing to, of course, enter into an agreement that says we'll install them at a point when it makes sense to install them. We don't think it makes sense at this point in time, and we would ask for that waiver from, I think it's 12333. We're also interested in a waiver with respect to the driveway, and I'll let Tim talk a little bit more about what his view of that was, but I can tell you the issue really was raised in Casey Moore's report with McMahon about a driveway permit from PennDOT, and from our perspective, again, we've done some numbers, and there's a possibility that we'll spend in excess of $50,000 just to apply for a permit and do what all that PennDOT ultimately wants us to do, and we clearly don't want to do that. And if that is a requirement, then of course the project may be dead on arrival because we just can't afford to spend that kind of money. but I think it'll improve the site. I think it'll improve that section of Ridge, and I believe it will be conducive to what the owner wishes to do and to maintain the business that's there. And it's a good business. It's been going on for a long time, and we'd like to maintain that. But Tim, go ahead. I'm sorry if you wanted to chime in about the driveway.
Happy to do so. Yeah, and maybe a little background, Keith, as Mike and I discussed the project after we had met with you all on site, I think we were very supportive of some of the concepts that we discussed. Rather than calling it a waiver of that sidewalk, I think we rather refer to it as a deferral of sidewalk. You know, as we looked at Ridge Pike West zoning ordinances and our vision for the Ridge Pike West redevelopment, I think pedestrian connectivity is important to us. But I think Keith is correct. Building sidewalk today without knowing what's happening adjacent, what's happening with Grabe, what's happening to Ridge Pike itself is probably not a prudent move. So I think we'd like to suggest as a staff to defer sidewalk until an appropriate time. There was some discussion about the existing access to the building from Ridge Pike and the current width of that service road. There is the possibility that we could request that road be widened to 24 feet to meet our parking lot standards. Due to the volume of traffic that uses the facility, I'm not sure that that is a wise addition of impervious cover to a critical watershed. We discussed with the applicant and his engineer perhaps some pull-offs or some widened sections of that driveway to help traffic pass if they were to encounter each other either entering or exiting the site. And they've agreed that that would be a change they would make to the plan if this board were so willing to grant the waiver of the obligation to widen the entire length of that service drive. As Mike pointed out, these plans were before the Planning Commission on 2 occasions. We had some initial concerns and questions about stormwater that have been answered. There were some questions about landscaping that have been answered. So I think with that in mind, I think the staff is in a position to recommend moving this plan forward.
Okay.
I will add that we did an informal traffic survey just so that you would understand what comes in and what goes out of that location. And for the month of September at the very least, and it's obviously not scientific, but it ranges anywhere from 17 cars to 30 cars. So there's not a lot going in and out of there from our perspective. So we don't see this as changing because we're not expanding capacity per se. We're just making workflow improvements. So, and I appreciate, Tim, your deferral reference. That was a poor choice of words by the word merchant, the lawyer. So I appreciate that. Any questions from the board for us? And the engineer is here, Nick Stardust is here, who's done a lot of the heavy lifting. I'm just here to look good.
Any questions?
Just a couple on clarification. So from the plans, which I've looked at, but I've looked at that, the deferral would be described in some point to where the sidewalks would be installed when adjacent sidewalks of similar, I mean, there's language that would describe when that deferral would then be due.
That would be my suggestion, Peter, yes, and we'll let John draft that in some kind of approval resolution. But it's not an atypical process, you know, in a situation like this. It's kind of a remote area today that we are hoping won't be so remote in the future. And, you know, John, the deferral of sidewalk comment will appear in some resolution. It would probably appear as a note on the record plan as well, so there would be some way to memorialize that obligation.
Well, let's be clear what we're talking about. So deferral, there's a couple ways to defer improvements. One is to put a note on the plan. The other one is to you put the money up and we hold that money until the sidewalks are ready to be put in, because you could sell the property and then somebody else comes along and he doesn't know about the deferral or she doesn't know about the deferral. Tim, how many lineal feet of sidewalks are we talking about
Nick,
waiving
what's that
there?
property frontage, like 300, not even, right? Two, yeah, 150.
150?
Yep. I'm not a big fan, John, typically of putting that money away. That account gets so lost. You know, if sidewalk's not 5, 6, 8 years out, you know, who remembers that that money is earmarked for this project, for that
Yeah,
sidewalk? It's difficult to maintain an escrow account for that
Right,
long.
but if we're not going to do that, because I've done that and I've seen it sit there for 10 years and then nobody remembers what this money's for. In fact, there was some here 3 years ago that we found that we had to go back and track. So But we still need to record something against the real estate. A note on a plan isn't going to cut it, in my opinion. There's got to be some kind of covenant that triggers that.
And I don't think there's any objection to that whatsoever. I mean, Mr. Schaffner's been very straight with me in saying, hey, if it comes to pass that we need to do it, we'll do it. It's not a problem. And if that means putting on the deed, a deed restriction, we
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah, so, I mean, a waiver subject to that covenant being placed against the property is, someone else could own that property in 5 years. And not, people don't read notes on plans a lot, quite often when they buy real estate. I don't know, Peter, do you have another question on it?
Yes, separate from the sidewalk, but I would support that. I don't favor asking for the money up front. I just want to make sure that there's a method by which when sidewalks are being pushed through, that this area is then required to do that. And I think you've covered that point. And the only other question I had, referring to Tim's comments on the driveway entry, is what's shown on the plan as a wider area in the left-hand portion of the drive. Is that what is planned? I mean, that is what you're describing, Tim, in terms of an access to keep cars from having to stop on Ridge Pike if one is egressing while one is trying to.
That is correct. As we walked the site, we saw that as a condition of concern. As someone's exiting, someone's entering, we didn't want that conflict to cause somebody to back up on Ridge Pike or, cause a head-on accident in the driveway. So being able to create 2 lanes at Ridge Pike inside the PennDOT right-of-way was probably the most important feature of that waiver.
Okay, and that area that's just shown is sufficient for that purpose?
I believe so, yes.
Right, okay. And just one other clarification, if I might. The new construction is the lightly shaded area in the right-hand side? The rectangle? Is that
Yes.
the new construction area?
Proposed, yeah, right there, the proposed building addition, right in the middle here now.
Right, right. And is there existing building to the left of that area now?
No, to the right.
Only to the right, okay. Okay, thank you.
Just a couple other questions, just so I understand. What the board's been doing with plans that come in front of them, Keith,
2
is
steps.
there's 2 steps.
But I have a resolution drafted for you to give to you to make your life easier. I'm going to send it to you by email. You're going to
Don't
tweak it
bother.
however you want.
It's going to take me too long to fix it anyway, so I'm just going to do it myself. I'm just
Not one
doing
of
it
my
myself.
resolutions.
But I have questions. There's waivers to
Yes, thank you. I was going to get to those. Yes.
sidewalks, curb parking islands. We've discussed the 20-foot wide driveway entrance. And there's if you want to address the rest of the waivers, because there seems to be some other ones embedded in the reviews that aren't in the summary. So somebody needs to, if I'm going to prepare the resolution, I don't think the waiver letter from the applicant's engineer has all the waivers in it. But I might be wrong.
Well, I think
So-
there were a couple of different waiver requests over the
There's
course of this.
There's
So
partial waivers, and then there's full waivers, so, Mr. McLennan, you want to address any more of those?
the ones that I believe that you're referring to would be 12337C, which relates to the raised islands with curbed and planted areas. And I believe we've addressed that with staff, at least with Mr. Woodrow, with respect to the sheet flow of stormwater into the bioretention basin. It's the best management practice that's utilized by DEP now to allow the flow. Otherwise, it's going to be impeded, and then we have to install catch basins and piping and that kind of thing. So we're trying to follow the trend that's popular today with the DEP, and that's what we had proposed. And I don't believe that there's any opposition from Tim on that. Am I correct? You are correct. So we're looking to, in essence, get a waiver of that section. And the only other one that I recall or that I have written down is 12332, storm sewers and curbing shall be constructed along all existing streets and along both sides of all new interior streets. So there's no new interior streets. There's curbing already on Ridge Pike. And I don't know that we necessarily needed to address it, although it was one issue that was raised historically.
Yeah, I think it's in my August 5th review, Keith, as comment number 1 under subdivision land development. The ordinance does provide an ability for the township to request drainage improvements, maybe improved curbing, widening perhaps if it were warranted. Per our site visit, I don't think we saw anything that revealed itself as an issue. Drainage across Ridge Pike appeared to be sufficiently handled. The curbing was of sufficient quality that I didn't see a lot of repair needed there. So I would support a waiver request, Keith, if that were your proposal.
Thank you.
Okay.
I believe that was it, John, if I'm mistaken. Those are the 4 that I had listed,
Okay,
at least.
right, yeah, Tim has it as a partial waiver. I was looking at his review, and then the county review, is there anything in there or in the committee review that needs to be addressed?
No, because I think the county's review basically mirrored what Tim had to say when he wrote his initial review, and I think we addressed those previously. The only other item that was raised was the issue of whether there was an increased capacity for the sewer authority, and we're well under both the collection capacity and the treatment capacity, so we don't envision a problem there. We can have as many bathrooms, as I talk to Tom about this all the time, he says, you can have as many bathrooms as you want. It's really a question of the collection and then the treatment, and we have increased the treatment based upon what was offered recently from the township to increase the treatment capacity, so we've taken advantage of that. And we're averaging 153 gallons a day. Our number is 200 gallons a day, so we haven't really had any issues there. So I don't see a problem there.
How many employees at the facility?
Well, I can tell you it's about 8 at most.
Okay,
That's on a great day,
okay.
based upon the traffic flow.
Then the only other thing, Mike's memo references a traffic impact fee and a statement that an adjustment would be considered upon submission of a traffic generation study. Is there going to be a study submitted, or is it the fee is the fee? There's no request for any modification at this point?
We haven't asked for anything from that perspective, and I don't envision that there's going to be a study other than the informal one that we did.
Okay, all right. And the park and rec fee there's no waivers from any of that. That's all I had.
Thanks.
Okay, any additional questions? All righty, sir, we'll see you back in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Moving on, item 3B, authorization to advertise an ordinance amending and restating the defined contribution plan for full-time, non-uniform employees. And Mr. Rice, you are on for that one, sir.
Yes, we had adopted a resolution probably 2 or 3 months ago, essentially approving the adoption agreement. There's a comment from your auditor that wants an ordinance adopted. So we're basically redoing the resolution in the form of an ordinance, and you're going to re-adopt it again. So that's just up for, this is the same governmental money purchase plan and trust adoption agreement that was put together with, Jerry's not here, but Jerry and Dan Paci from my office, and you approved a couple months ago. So just going to clean up that item, and hopefully the auditor will be happy.
Okay, is there a motion to authorize the advertising of an ordinance amending and restating the defined contribution plan for full-time, non-uniform employees?
Make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. Questions or comments from the board? From the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3C, consideration of the Parks and Recreation Department 5-year capital plan. Mr. Lukens is with us tonight. Good evening, Carl.
In your packet, you should have the plan and an overview. And I believe that tonight's executive session, you should have received an updated plan. Sorry about that, a little copy and paste before it went in the packet. So on the screen is an overview of the next 5 years. The Park and Rec Board has been working on this for several months. Did some site visits and had determined this is going to be the best way to take care of some of our needs over the next 5 years.
So if you have any questions for me, I think that's probably the best. I'd be happy to address them. Otherwise, the Park and Rec Board would appreciate you making a motion on this plan.
Carl, I got one question on your 5-year overview. We have this shorter version. Your 2021 number doesn't match the prior sheets. 2021 in your descriptive area is 66,000, and in 2021 on the Excel sheet, if I may, is 86. And the difference is item 3, walking path repairs. It's listed on the descriptive area at 30,000 and on the Excel sheet at 50.
Yeah, that was a last-minute change. Sorry about that. It should be 50.
50 on the descriptive.
Yes. Apologize for that.
Other questions? Okay. Do we hear a motion to adopt the Parks and Recreation Department 5-year capital plan?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any additional questions or comments?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. We're voting on this on the Parks and Rec Department capital, but not as part of an overall capital plan. And why would we take that separately? Are we taking them all separately, or do we have a comprehensive plan that this will fold into?
The Parks and Rec budget is only funded in the event that we actually get the money through development. So these are, unlike the capital plan that we would fund independently of
It's a
that.
separate revenue fund.
This is separate.
Yeah, this is Fund 33.
Thank you.
And then for the audience out there too, we only do these projects if there's money in the bank. So a few years back, when there wasn't a lot of money in the bank, a lot of these projects were being pushed off. We just keep them on the plan for priority and so they don't get lost.
Understood, thanks.
Any questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Carl, for your work on that, and thank you also for your work on the Fall Fest this past weekend. Very successful. Thank you. By way of announcements, item 4, we'll have the Parks and Recreation Board meeting on October 11th at 7 p.m., followed the following evening by the Sewer Authority meeting on the 12th at 7:30 p.m., and on the 17th, the Library Board will meet at 7 p.m. over at the library. Comments and other business. Any comments from the board?
We can just note that the library's having their comedy night with Methacton alumni Chip Chantry on Friday, October 28th at Chadwick's. Tickets are available currently at the library, so it should be a great night. Please come out and support the library.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else on the board? Mr. Solicitor, Madam Manager? Staff? Okay, item 6, courtesy of the floor. No one? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion, and is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Our next meeting will be on October 20th. See you back here. Thanks for coming out. Have a good night.